Time to talk about how to get your customers to love what you sell. And it's actually a little bit less about the actual product or service you're offering and really a lot more about the entire customer experience. We're going to talk about customer experience today on the show and some simple details that you might be missing when it comes to totally blowing your customers away. Hey, my name is Blake Benz. I'm the host of the Good Advice podcast, and this is the place to learn how to do business better, the actionable, practical things you need to know, none of that fluff, none of the academic stuff, the stuff that actually works here on today's podcast. If you're checking out the podcast for the first time, welcome to our show. And before we dive into today's episode, we have a quick word from one of the incredible businesses that sponsors the podcast. Don't forget, you can always support the podcast on our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice, the price of a cup of coffee. And other than that, I appreciate you all. Let's get into it right after this quick ad. There's one single piece of advice that I give to business owners who are ready to scale their business drastically. And that's knowing exactly what you need to hand off so that you can continue focusing on what you're an expert in. It amazes me when I talk to business owners who are doing their own bookkeeping and tax prep, and worse, that they're going through all this paperwork at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, even midnight, slaving away trying to make sense of all of the numbers for their business. Business owners who are making it happen have already figured out that you can't do it all yourself. That's why I recommend Steve Lay with Equity Business Solutions. Not only is he an expert in bookkeeping and tax prep, but what I love about Steve is that he'll sit down with you and help you make sense of the value of your business beyond just reading a spreadsheet. You'll be able to make better decisions, and more importantly, you're going to save yourself the crucial time you would have spent going through QuickBooks or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is that keeps us up late at night. So save yourself some time and some money by giving Steve Lay a call at Equity Business Solutions, and he'll show you the value beyond your numbers. Go to equitybusinesssolutionsllc.com to find out more. All right. So today's podcast episode, we're going to be talking about really creating an incredible experience for your customer. We'll get into some specifics on it today, but I want to talk about what led to today's episode. There were two things that led to it. The first one was a post from Stacy Sherman, who she has her own podcast called Doing CX Right, all about customer experience. And she posted on LinkedIn that she had been waiting on an airport runway for an hour and a half waiting to take off. Why was it taking so long? I don't know. The airline gives different reasons. I'm getting different emails. The flight attendants don't know. And yet, this is an experience that we've all had before, sitting on a tarmac, wondering what the heck's going on. Maybe you get an update from the pilot. Maybe you get like the random detail on they're fixing something. But often you have no idea how long it's going to take. And whatever timelines they give often don't get met. It's, by the way, one of the reasons why I hate flying. Flying is one of the least enjoyable experiences out there because things are almost never on time. You're almost never comfortable. It's relatively expensive, and the whole thing's just a pain. I don't like flying for this whole reason. If I can drive, I'm going to drive. So all this to say, I had this post pop up on my LinkedIn, and then a friend of mine, Krista Molion, who's been on the podcast, she's a fractional CMO, does an incredible job for businesses, has around 70,000 followers on LinkedIn, and she is no stranger to paying for different consultants or services or what have you. So here's what her post was a week ago, and I reached out to her and said, hey, do you mind if I talk about this on the podcast? And she was like, go for it, do it. So Krista posted this a week ago. She said, in 2024, I joined 4 paid communities that were all annual pay. I purchased 5 courses that ranged from $200 to $8,000. I also paid 10 coaches for consultations on various business topics they're experts in, and I spent over $500,000 on vendors, $500,000. So this person has spent over $500,000 on outside services for her business. And she says, let me tell you how many of these followed up personally. 2. But even they did not thank me for being a customer, which I feel like I feel like this is just a great pausing point. I feel like in the world of B2B, in the world of serving other businesses, we have become so accustomed to this concept of I'm providing a service, it's business to business. It shouldn't be almost like it shouldn't be personal, almost like it shouldn't be I don't know. It's kind of like it's just this weird feeling. It's this weird vibe. And whenever I do business with someone, and I'll get more into this here in a second, but one of the first things I tell people is, hey, thank you for trusting me with your dollar. Hey, thank you for saying yes to me as opposed to someone else. And I think there's, by the way, a way to say this where, sometimes we are insecure or we're worrisome about are they going to like what they get. And so when we say things like this, I think sometimes it can come across as desperate or digging for a compliment like, hey, I hope you really like the service, thank you, where stuff like that isn't a good feeling for your customer. But on the same token, I think we miss the opportunity to give a genuine thank you to our customers and it still be from a place of confidence. So one of the first things I always tell my customers is, hey, you could have bought from anybody. You could have spent your dollar anywhere. Thank you for choosing Good Advice or Podcastable or whatever the service is. So I think this is an interesting just point to talk about here, that out of all of the money that she spent, not one provider said, hey, thanks for being my customer. We're going to come back to that in a second, okay? So of the two that reached out, they wanted some feedback from me on their own needs. And one of the two was only after I reached out first twice. None of them checked in personally to see how I was doing or seemed generally interested if I might be interested in more services in 2025. Man, there's a lot to unpack here, by the way. And I think sometimes if you're more of a casual listener, you might misunderstand what Krista's saying here. She's not saying I'm annoyed that people didn't want to be my friend and like, how are you? But she's talking about these providers didn't reach out to say, hey, what I sold you, how's it going? Maybe I sold you a marketing offer or a sales offer or some kind of consulting package. Did it work? Talk to me about that. And I've even found myself in conversations like this with past customers where I kind of sense that they aren't fully happy with what we've done together. And so I am a little hesitant to be like, what'd you think about it? And what I have found, what has made me better in my services is getting over myself and actually asking that question. Hey, what'd you think about our time together? Hey, tell me about, what worked, what didn't work? Because not only does that make it better for me, it also validates it for the customer to have an opportunity to share their feedback. If you're only asking people who you knocked it out of the park with to tell you what they think of you, you're really looking for your ego to get fed rather than improving your product or service. So, and then the other part of this to unpack is that, and this is a challenge for me in that I've never wanted my customers to feel like I was tacking on services or trying to resell them. And so I would find myself in situations where someone would be over the moon with our time together. And rather than being like, hey, I'm glad this was so helpful for you, let's talk about what next year could hold. Like how else could we be collaborating together? Or, hey, here's another pain point you talked about. I have a solution to that. Instead of doing things like that, it's, well, I don't want to oversell them, so I'm never going to ask them again about what else they might want from me. And we miss opportunities to collaborate. So she said, I do receive mass generic emails from some of them, and one seemed hell-bent on spamming me with new offers weekly unless I blocked him. I feel like this is a whole podcast episode, by the way. Like, this started with like customer experience, but now that I'm like actually reading this line by line, I'm like, oh, can't do that. Oh, shouldn't do that. Oh, and I think sometimes people take a concept way over the top of like, the value of newsletters and newsletter marketing, and these things typically work and they're great. There can be a great ROI on them, but then taking the concept and playing it out way too far, where in this case, Someone's getting an offer. This person's getting an offer literally every week. I signed up. Actually, I didn't sign up for a newsletter, but I went to an event, and at the event, there was a sales pitch, but I had to register my email to go to the event. And probably almost, it felt like every day after the event, I was getting a pitch for a service from this person to the point where I was like, dude, where's the unsubscribe button? This is insane. So I totally relate with her saying, getting weekly offers until I blocked him. So the purpose of this note isn't to complain, but instead to urge you to care about your existing and past customers. Is it so hard to say thank you? Is it hard to inquire if they feel the service met their expectations and to even ask them if they need anything else from you? It feels like everyone is so focused on getting new customers. Yes, this is important, but the priorities are skewed. I feel like the higher duty should be gratitude and appreciation for current customers. If you want to stay in business long, start caring more about your existing customers, especially the ones who pay you well and give you repeat business. Wow. I love this concept. And if you've been listening to the podcast long term, you've heard me talk about this before as well. This concept of 1,000 true fans, understanding that to run $1 million business, you don't need all these customers. You simply have to do well with the customers you have today to deliver an experience where your customers will want to buy from you again and again and again. And this story kind of reminds me of why I'm so grateful to not have my cable service anymore. Here's what typically buying cable from the TV provider looked like. I'd have cable, I'd have it for a year, and it'd get to be too expensive. And it always drove me crazy how the price always increased every month. Like there has to be some scam inherent to this, by the way, in retrospect. But the price would always increase a little bit every month. It'd go up a few dollars. Well, after a couple of years, you're in 24 months of this, you're suddenly paying a lot more. And I remember on more than one occasion calling and trying to cancel and being told, well, hang on, if I can give you a discount, if I can give you a special promotion for the next 6 months, would you keep your contract with us? And I would do the math on it, and the discount would be so sizable that it would make more sense to stay with this company than it would be to go get cable somewhere else. But it always bothered me how I would look at this and say, why am I being offered a discount to not leave as opposed to being given a discount for staying? Why am I getting some kind of deal when I'm thinking about going to a competitor instead of getting celebrated for my loyalty to this provider? Now, this is less about the dollars you charge and even incentives around this. And, as the economy, as inflation increases, so may your costs and the cost of your services to your customer. So this is not any kind of insight around, every year a customer works with you, knock off 5% off their price. But it kind of is a little bit like that, in that it's interesting to me how I think Krista's right. We are so keen to go find that next customer that we lose the opportunities with the customers we currently have. I am so aware of long-term buyers of my brand. I think of one gentleman who's bought from me for probably, maybe 3 years now. And I think to myself, this is someone who deserves endless gratitude from me, in that I don't need to be weird about it, but there is no shortage of times that I have told him, thanks for your business, and tried to show that appreciation. And frankly, there's more that I can do. It's funny that I'm talking about this. I was actually thinking about this customer this morning I haven't done anything recently to really show this person how much I appreciate them. By the way, it doesn't have to be something expensive you do for your customer. It can be a letter in the mail. It could be a note. It could be any number of things. And I mention that also, by the way, because sometimes when we think about appreciation, we go really big and grand. And I think it's almost like being married to a spouse. It's less about the grandness of what you do and a lot more about the intentionality behind it. So one thing, and I'll just walk you through some specifics here in terms of like customer experience here in a second, but one thing I did over the holidays was I sent a video to each of my customers, 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Hey, thanks for your business this year. I really appreciate it. Even customers where our contracts were rolling off and ending and they weren't going to continue in 2025. Hey, we did business this year. I really appreciate it. And by the way, this was not a pre-recorded 30-second video that everyone got. It was, I was looking at my customers for the year. I went down the list of every single person. I opened up, turned on the camera, said, hey, Brad, hey, Tony, hey, I'm trying to think of names, but listing off my customers here. And I'd say, hey, thank you for buying blank or investing in your business through blank, whatever that service was. I so appreciate it. Hey, thank you so much. And I just try to take 30 seconds of intentionality just to say thank you to my current customers. We are often so driven by who is the next customer that we really let our current customers who said yes to you originally fall by the wayside instead of recognizing how valuable those customers are. They're valuable not just in terms of opportunity of repeat business, but often these people can become the biggest marketers for you in your business because they've had such a positive experience. Let me tell you something. Whenever you buy something, you don't buy because of the marketing the business gave to you. You don't buy because of the ad that you saw. You buy because you go to the Google reviews or the Amazon reviews, or you ask your neighbor or your friend or your loved one, hey, I saw that you bought this. What'd you think about this? And that person's referral goes farther than anything else that you could experience. In the same way, your past customers can be some of the most valuable, that can be some of the most valuable marketing things for your future customers if you do a good job. I was in a sales meeting the other day, and the guy I was talking to, he said, I'm not totally confident on the value. Because anytime there's hesitance, I try to be as direct and candid as possible. So I said, hey, have I done a poor job around the value? Is it about price? What have you? And this guy said, I'm not sure about the price. I'm not sure about the value of it. And I said, okay, here's what I can tell you. I'm going to give you a list of my customers. You can call literally any one of them. I'll give you a list of my past customers. You can call any one of them. Like, I feel that confident that you can call any of my customers today and ask, how have things gone with Blake? What did you think about him? What went well? What didn't go well? And by the way, I also always pair this from a sales perspective of not over promising or promising the world. Sometimes I do sit down with people who are a little green on buying outside services, and so they don't know what to expect. And so someone might be like, hey, yeah, I run a $250,000 business. So us working together, this is going to get me to 10 million, right? And it's like, no, it's not going to get you to 10 million. Now you're going to have some great advice, but it's still your business to run. So whenever I tell people, hey, call any of my previous customers, I've also paired that with realistic expectations on what our work together is going to look like. But we have to think about what truly a meaningful experience is with businesses that we engage with. What I most often talk to companies about when it comes to doing business together, what I most often find is that businesses are incredibly focused on the immediate delivery of the service they've been paid for, and they don't typically think about very much else. So I'll talk about one company I was meeting with this last week who they basically, and without, it's so niche that if I get super specific, then those of you who are local will know who I'm talking about, and I don't necessarily want to out them. But let me just put it this way. There was a company that I was talking to earlier this week where when someone pays them, when they get a customer is going to spend about $40,000 with them. And then the dollars involved in the entire service, so not just what's directly paid to the company that I was talking to, the entire dollar amount spent is going to be 300, 400, $500,000 around this service. So in my conversations with this company, I said, okay, how much, like, what do you do when the contract's signed? Like, what are like some of the immediate steps with the customer? Well, we don't really do anything. Okay. How about when the services are delivered? What does offboarding look like? We don't really do anything. So think about how much value is being left on the table, how much opportunity is being left on the table. Because now, understand something, we hyper focus on the delivery of the service because that's literally what we've been paid for. So this isn't like some gotcha to businesses. It's that there is a grander opportunity here. Going back to Stacy Sherman's LinkedIn post about the airline, did she get flown from point A to point B? Yeah, she did. So the company eventually delivered on the service they were paid for, but yet the experience she had was not a quality experience. So we leave value on the table because we think that just by doing what we were paid to do, that's enough, when really we're lacking in the intentionality of all the other things that we can be doing. So let me share a little bit about what good advice does. And some of this is in process constantly. I'm always testing and trying new things with customers and trying to see, what's pinging, what's not pinging, what have you. But here's what it looks like today. So a company, a customer, a prospect is, we'll be in conversation and we get like a verbal yes. Contract gets sent off, invoice gets sent off, customer pays the invoice and signs the contract. The moment that the customer signs the contract, they are now in the onboarding process. And if you haven't thought about these terms, onboarding and offboarding, chances are you're thinking about just that very shallow middle band of just delivering the services. And unfortunately, if that is you, you're treating your customers probably like just everyone else is. And it's why people are having a hard time differentiating you from everybody else. And it's why I think when people talk about the value of your services, why people typically, because they can't see the difference, they end up looking at price and they end up saying, well, I'll probably just go with whoever's cheaper next time, which isn't a winning strategy for many businesses. So as soon as a customer signs a contract and pays their first invoice, which the invoice might be the whole amount, might be partial amount, just depends on the customer, they get an email from me. They get two things from me immediately. Three things, actually. First of all, they get an email from me. They get an email that says, welcome to the Good Advice Tribe. And it's always the same email. It even says in the email, hey, this is an automated email, so that they know it's automated. But it's specific to them as well. It's, hey, John, looking forward to our work together. Here's what the next steps look like. And what those next steps are is based on what they've purchased. So if they've bought like a podcastable membership, or they've paid for, we're going to collaborate and work together from a consultant point of view, what is in that bullet point list is very different. But it's basically, here's what you can expect next. Here's what happens next. Because there's nothing worse than spending thousands of dollars, literally thousands of dollars, on a service and then getting crickets. Okay, what happens now? Okay, what am I waiting? I just said yes to this. And for some people, it's an emotional purchase. I'm really excited. I'm really amped. I'm really energized around what's coming next for my business or my brand or what have you. So to then get that reflected with silence can be very concerning, and it's not a great strategy for your customers. It's not a great experience, for your customers. So they get the email that says, here's what you can expect. And it is the immediate timeline of like, here's what the next week looks like. And then usually there's a bit of a leadway on all of this, leeway, lead. There's a little bit of lead on the time we're actually going to get together, what the work looks like, usually about 30 days at least. And so they're also getting dates. Here's our first meeting. Here's what to expect. Here's what we're doing leading up to that. Point being, it's less about the minutia of like what you're saying in this, but it's letting them know, here's what's next for you. And then that also ends with, if you ever need to reach me or contact me, here's the best way to contact me. And then here's the pacing you can expect to hear from me. So part of what's in that is I might say, here's my email, here's my cell phone. If you call me or email me, I will always get back to you within 2 business days. So I say that because I want them to know what, and fortunately, I've almost always only had great customers, but I say that intentionally so that if I get into a situation where someone calls me or they email me and I don't respond, there's not like, where are you? What's happening? What's going on? None of that. So they get the email, they get a video from me, and it's a 30-second quick, it's not pre-recorded. It's, this is a service with Sarah. So I'll sit down. Sarah's bought this program. I'll turn on the camera and I'll say, hey, Sarah, thanks so much for doing business with Good Advice or Podcast or what have you. I'm really excited about X so that they know I know what the contract is. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out, what have you. And what's funny is like this random video that gets sent out. I've gotten more positive feedback around this random video than I've gotten anything else in the onboarding process. People who say, hey, nice touch. Hey, I love this. Hey, I'm really surprised you sent this. Like, I'm just thinking of like just random comments I've gotten over the years. I think people like knowing that you recognize them as an individual buyer and not just one of many who maybe have paid for a service. So they get the email, they get the video, and then, which I'm a little hesitant to share this because I don't know if people listening, if you become my customer, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but I also send a welcome box to my customers. And this actually, the cost of the welcome box, I mean, it's a few hundred dollars. So it depends on what someone has purchased. If someone buys a $500 Pod Start course, they aren't getting this, only because it just doesn't make sense from a dollars and cents perspective. They do get the first 2 emails, but they don't get the welcome box. But if someone spends $5K or $7,500 or whatever, they're absolutely getting this. They're getting a welcome box that has a handwritten note from me. Thanks for your purchase. They're typically getting a book that I really like that I think would be valuable for them in their business. And then lastly, they're getting branded swag. And it's not my branded swag. I think this is the differentiator. They're not getting my branded swag. They're getting their branded swag. So I had a customer who loved coffee. I sent him a Yeti, and it's quality stuff, by the way. I'm not going to the dollar store and getting some random mug. It's a Yeti mug. My print shop printed their logo on it. I bought some really expensive coffee and threw that in the box. And then they opened the gift box and, oh, wow, this is my company, my brand. And I've done anything from that to golf balls to even a Frisbee that I was looking at for a customer of mine. So, they get something personal for them just to really hone in the appreciation for getting them as a customer. So this is a lot of what onboarding looks like. And there's some, future steps there. There's some technical stuff that happens from like a communication standpoint that's not important for the show. But point being, it's when you have the absence of thought around that, you create a disappointing experience for your customer. So they get onboarding, they get the delivery of the service, which, by the way, from a customer experience standpoint, communication is king. So when things aren't going well, anytime your customer has to be like, what's going on? When are we meeting? What's happening? And this is, by the way, not just for positive, but also negative things. I had a customer where we're doing some marketing for them and we had a setback on the project with them. And so it was like a Friday afternoon, I think. And I thought, oh, I could probably wait till Monday. But I thought, it's probably better and nothing was like disastrous or on fire. But I thought, I should probably call this customer and just let them know, here's the problem. Here's how we're fixing it. Here's what you can know about it. So I called the customer, and funny enough, the customer, who is like the most uninvolved customer, I would have thought they wouldn't even know what we were working on. The customer, of all people, had already noticed it on their end. And he picks up the phone and says, hey, I was about to call you. And I remember thinking, like, I am so glad I called this person first instead of him calling and being like, well, what's going on here? What's happening here? Right? So that's just from the delivery point of view, being communicative, letting your customers know where they are in the process, being on the front end of things that go wrong. All this to say, once the deal is done, once the contract is done and you've completed the service, I think the next thing that a lot of people miss is offboarding, good offboarding. And what this looks like, it's an opportunity to ask for feedback. Hey, what'd you think about the service? Hey, what worked, what didn't work? This doesn't have to be exhaustive, by the way. You don't need in the old days of good advice, I would send like a survey and there's all these questions. And I feel bad for the customers who I guilted into filling this out, but it doesn't have to be exhaustive. But, did it work? Did it not work? What went well? What didn't go well? Did things line up with what you were expecting? Was this worth what you spent on it? And part of this also from like an offboarding perspective on my end is reminding people what we've accomplished together. Sometimes that's a revenue number. And so it might be, hey, yeah, your revenue tripled while we were working together. So, it may not have been great advice, but it was obviously good enough advice for your business to grow. So, and this is less about like a rap sheet of like, well, we did this. I mean, it's just about hey, this is where you were when we started. This is where we are today. So that they can, because sometimes these contracts can take several months. And so the person can forget and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, I forgot we did all this. This is great. So it's to share what we accomplished. It's to get feedback. And it's to let them know how else you can collaborate together. And this is something that I had to really grow into, and I'm still growing into today, because I never wanted my customers to feel like I was trying to get another sale out of them, that I was trying to, force them to buy from me again. And so I'd be like, all right, well, great. See you later. And now I've gotten so much more confident and comfortable about, hey, there were these other issues that showed up. I can help with that. Or here's what another service might look like. Is that something you're interested in? Are you looking to get help in that? And I had this come up with one of my customers who, one of the things we had talked about on and on and on again during our time together was his sales process and getting more organic customers. So as we were rolling up our work together, I said, hey, with BetterRank, hey, with our SEO service, I can help you with that. We can get you customers to your website because right now you're not getting any. You're getting nothing. Is that something you'd be interested in? Is that a service you would want? And he was like, well, yeah, for sure. Definitely would want that. And I said, okay, let's do it. So one contract had ended. The next one was signed. Sometimes, people don't know what else you can do, or they don't know what the service is. And so when you say nothing, you lose a prospective customer that you've already built trust with, and you lose them to someone else simply because they didn't know you could do that thing. So all that to say, you need intentionality around the offboarding process. And this, by the way, is another time to say, thank you. Thank you for your business. It's a great time to ask for a Google review. I usually joke with my customers. I say, and I could probably be a lot more keen on my Google reviews than maybe I have been in my past, but I typically joke and say, hey, if you had a great experience, feel free to leave me a 5-star review. If you had a terrible experience, maybe don't leave a review. And I make a joke like that just to take kind of the sting out of it in case someone's like, I'm not leaving you a review. Again, fortunately, I've been fortunate enough to have great customers and great experiences, but usually I might remind them one time and say, hey, make sure you leave that Google review. And then otherwise, I just kind of leave it alone and let it go. But I have found in the offboarding process that people typically don't ask. They typically just say like goodbye, and they miss the opportunity to capture some of that positive customer experience for other people to see. So keeping that in mind, onboarding, offboarding, if you're not doing either of these, you're likely leaving money on the table. And knowing how hard it is to get a new customer, knowing how challenging it is to make a sale, it's a heck of a lot easier if you can find your next sale in the customers you already have, granted that you're actually doing a great job and delivering on what you said you would do. Hey, that's today's Good Advice podcast episode. Thanks for tuning into the show today. And if you're a first-time listener or watcher of the podcast, what the heck are you waiting on? Click that subscribe or follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you are. As always, we appreciate the sponsors of the show, the people who advertise on the podcast, and those of you who support the podcast on our Patreon. I am so grateful to you. That's today's Good Advice. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.